Once we've calculated the cost of the bundle in each of the years and calculated the index from that, we can calculate the inflation rate. And the inflation rate follows a simple formula. Essentially what we want to do is look at the change in the index divided by the previous year's index times 100 to convert it into a percentage. So our example from the previous slide, in 2008, our index value was 250. In 2007, our index value was 175. So the index went up by 75 points, 250 minus 175, from a base of 175, which is an increase of 43%. In other words, our inflation rate was 43%. In 2007, looking at the previous year, the index had climbed from 100 to 175. The increase then was 75 divided by our starting index value of 100 means that in 2007 we had an increase of 75%, or an inflation rate of 75%. So in other words, to calculate the inflation rate, what we want to do is look at the change in the index divided by the starting value of an index and then multiply times 100 to convert it into a percentage. The CPI's goal is to measure changes in the cost of living from one year to the next, and it's reasonable to ask whether it is a good measure of that, whether the CPI is doing its job. The CPI is, I would say, a good measure of the rate of inflation, but it's not perfect, and economists have identified a number of problems in using the CPI. The first one we'll talk about is what we call the substitution bias. And suppose that the two goods in our index bundle are Coke and Pepsi, and consumers view Coke and Pepsi as perfect substitutes. If the price of Coke goes up by 10% and the price of Pepsi stays flat, we might say that on average prices have risen by 5%. But to consumers who can simply substitute Pepsi for Coke, they see zero increase in effective purchasing power. So as they substitute away from the goods that have become more expensive, in this case Coke, towards the goods that have stayed the same, in this case Pepsi, or in real life perhaps decreased, we can offset some of the pain of the price increases by substituting away from those goods. In reality then, our cost of living hasn't gone up at all. Note that this problem is reversed when we consider the GDP deflator. Suppose in this case that Coke and Pepsi are not perfect substitutes, but I like Coke better than Pepsi. If the price of Coke goes up by 10% and I switch to Pepsi, I do so, but I might do so, but not by choice, or not in a way that I'm indifferent between the two things. I see that I am worse off. I switch to Pepsi, but I see that I am worse off because I really would have preferred Coke when they were at the same price. The GDP deflator reflects the bundle of goods that I consume after I have made the switch, and so it would see that the cost of the things that I'm purchasing haven't gone up, but in reality I'm worse off. So the substitution effect is something that economists try very hard to capture, but it's difficult. And in a bundle such as the CPI, the problem is that we don't measure the fact that we can substitute away from things that have become more expensive and toward things that have become less expensive. With the GDP deflator, essentially it sees what happens after we've already made those substitutions and doesn't account for the fact that part of the substitutions we're making are because we've become worse off due to certain price indexes. One of the things you'll hear economists talk about sometimes is what's called chain weighting. And in chain weighting, what we try to do is consider the before bundle and the after bundle in trying to decide the true increase in the cost of living. Additionally, it's difficult for the CPI to reflect new goods, to reflect things that didn't used to be available. In 1982 to 1984, which is the base year of the CPI, but not when the bundle was chosen, there are all sorts of things that didn't even exist back then. HD TVs and a lot of the safety standards on vehicles and iPhones and laptop computers and iPads and things like that. A lot of these things didn't even exist when the original bundle was created, and incorporating these changes into the CPI is very, very difficult. Additionally, changes in quality are hard to measure. A TV set today is not like a TV set of the past, and measuring changes in quality is very difficult as well. Taken together, the CPI will tend to overstate changes in the cost of living. Remember, we looked at the graph a few slides back and we saw that the CPI is rising somewhat faster than the GDP deflator. The truth, for the reasons we just discussed, is probably somewhere in between.